First of all, it's just a tremendous experience for me to be here at Madison Ruby. I've never been here before. As Jim says, I am a Badger through and through, so I bleed Badger red. And I'm incredibly thankful for the opportunity to be in front of all of you. And I am absolutely positive, 100% looking around the room and having sat in on most of the talks today, that I am the least technical person in the room. Even setting up the computer gave me a little bit of frustration here. So I'm going to talk about the circle of communication today, and I want to tell you a little bit about myself because I probably have some different experiences from the rest of you in the room. I've actually have a degree here from Wisconsin a few years ago. Actually, that might be a few decades ago. Maybe it's even more than a few decades ago. In teaching, I've got a degree in education, and I taught for a couple of years, and the man I married was an engineer and took us around the country, and so I had to find something else that was close to teaching, and for me that was sales. And so I got into sales, and from sales I got into the better part of my career was spent in medical and dental publishing. I was a publisher, and then I ran business units. And then I kind of jumped out of that and became a consultant, and I actually really loved that. And jumped out again and became an entrepreneur for a couple of years and sold the business that I had started. And then I did something that I absolutely adored. I went into retirement. It was great. I was playing golf, and I should tell you that I moved to Florida. I was originally in the greater Chicagoland area. I moved to Florida, and I was playing golf and going to the beach and riding my bike, and life was great. And then about 2 years ago, I went up to visit one of my children, Paul, and I don't know if most of you know that or not, but Paul Pagel. He's got the same last name I do. He is my middle child, and I was up visiting him at his place of business, 8th Light, and his business partner, Micah, was there, and they said, you know, I think it's time you came out of retirement and came and helped us, spend a little time with us, helping us with sales. And so, you know, I'm scratching my head going, am I in the right place at the wrong time, or the wrong place at the right time? And to this day, I'm still asking myself that question. But anyways, I acquiesced and decided to come on board and help them with sales, and it's been a tremendous experience along the way. And so what I want to tell you about today is my circle of communication and the 5 principles that I've primarily used for the last 30 plus years in my professional and in my personal career. And with each one of these principles, I'm going to tell you true stories. Now, I know some of you are going to say afterwards, you're going to come up to me and say, you made that up. Strangely, that's not true. These are all going to be true and somewhat unbelievable stories. Small talk. So, about 5 years ago, I am driving from Tampa, Florida to Southwest Florida, near Naples, which is where I live. I had been up to visit, I was consulting at the time, I had been up to visit a client, and I just bought a brand new red 9.3 turbo Saab convertible. And I decided to take the back roads from Tampa home to where I live in Estero, Florida, and I had the music cranked up, the top down. It was a beautiful evening. Until I looked in my rearview mirror and I saw the policeman chasing me. And so I pulled over, and he came up to me and he said, "Ma'am, do you know how fast you were going?" And first of all, I was insulted because he called me ma'am. And so I said, no, I didn't. And he said, "You're going about 23 miles an hour over the speed limit, and I think that's probably estimated to be between $400 and $450 fine. And oh, by the way, could you turn your stereo down?" So I gave him my driver's license, and he went back in his car, and I presumed he was writing up the ticket. And he comes up to me, and he says, "I'm almost complete writing up this ticket, but I can't see your driver's, the license plate. Could you please pull forward? I got too close to you when I pulled you over." So I turned the car on, moved 10 feet in front of me, and he walks behind to look at the license plate, and what should it be but a University of Wisconsin alumni vanity plate. Of course, anybody that knows me, again, I bleed Badger red. So he goes, Margaret, and of course he knows my name because he's got my driver's license. And he goes, are you from Wisconsin? And of course, anybody that knows me knows I love to talk about Wisconsin. I can talk for hours and hours ad nauseum. And I said, of course I am. And he's like, you didn't go to school there. And I'm thinking, it says alumni. Really? Come on. So anyways, he comes around to where I'm sitting in the car, and he's like, oh my gosh, when did you graduate? And I'm thinking, you should have looked at my license plate. It turns out he graduated the year before me. He's living in Florida. I'm living in Florida. Turns out his wife is a couple of years younger, and she's a UW Badger alumni also. And so we start talking about, drinking swamp water at the KK and going to the pub and who we know has been there and being at UW football games when our team never won. Those 4 years I was there, we never won. I think we beat Michigan once. And so like 20 minutes goes by, and he finally says to me, he says, I can't give you that ticket, but I'm going to give you a warning. And he goes, you know what? I really like you. So, I'm thinking, this is really going well for me. And he says, I'm going to give you my name and my home phone number, and, maybe you'd like to come on over and eat brats, drink beer, and play sheep's head. And those of you that are from Wisconsin would know that that's a great card game that we all play here in the state of Wisconsin. So I took all of his information, took my warning, went home, and the next day I woke up and I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to call this guy. So I picked up the phone and I said, hey, this is Margaret Pagel. Do you remember me last night? You pulled me over. I was the one going 23 miles an hour over the speed limit. Maybe he had somebody else going more. I don't know. And so anyways, the next Saturday night I went to his house. So I actually went the speed limit to his house. Where I met his wife and his kids, and we had the brats on the grill, the beer, we played some sheep's head. Turns out his wife worked for a large pharmaceutical company. Well, I think you saw on the first slide, I'm in sales, so it didn't stop there. I'm in medical consulting. And so by the time I left that evening, I had actually made new friends. I had actually gotten a very good prospect through his wife. And so the reason that I tell you this is that small talk starts conversations that can lead to developing relationships. For me, I have what I call my elevator speech. Anybody that knows me in the room has heard this, and anybody that doesn't is going to hear it now. And when you talk to me, chances are this is what you're going to hear from me when you first engage in a conversation with me. I usually say, hey, I'm Margaret Pagel. I'm the mother of 3 really awesome kids. And I really believe that. Number 2, right now in my life, I work for my son's company, 8th Light. Imagine my son hired his mom. Imagine trying to explain that in a sales meeting. Number 3, I actually live in Florida, but I work in Chicago. So, that's a head scratcher in and of itself, and can go on and for ad nauseum for hours discussion. The 4th thing that it usually comes out of my mouth is that I'm widowed. I'm almost 10 years widowed. And then the last is, hey, I am a Badger. I bleed Badger red. I'm a huge, huge, huge Green Bay Packer fan. Exactly. This is the part where I say I work in an office in Chicago with mostly 20 and 30-year-old males who believe that there's actually a professional team residing in Chicago. So, somebody just, landed the golden egg in my lap because I get to go in on Monday mornings during football season and talk about the Green Bay Packers. So it's a pure delight. So the point in telling you those are my 5 stories that I tell is that I talk about family, I talk about work, I talk about travel, I talk about tragedy, and then sports, or what I would call my homeland, which would be Wisconsin. So almost everybody I encounter can resonate with one of those 5 items. So that's my story. That's who I am. I totally become transparent and authentic immediately within the first 3 to 5 minutes of speaking to somebody. And that's typically what you have. You have about 3 to 5 minutes. And it's not 3 to 5 minutes to just have a conversation. It's 3 to 5 minutes to make people like you, so they want to have more conversation with you. So think about those stories that are yours, that you're comfortable telling. Make certain that there's a little bit of variety in there, that somebody can resonate with that. And then the next thing that I do is, once I've put myself out there, I try to come up with some questions that I can get the person that I'm speaking with or interacting with to communicate back with me. Usually family, usually work. At some point in everyone's life, they've worked, pretty much. Maybe not. But family, work, sports is always a good one. Ask people, what did you do last weekend? What did you want to be when you grew up? But people like to talk about themselves. So make certain that you're engaging with them. And people want to talk to people that they like. Building client relationships. Another Margaret Pagel story. I'm on an airplane, which is a frequent occurrence for me. I'm on an airplane from Florida to Chicago. This is a couple of years ago. And a nice young man comes and sits down in the window next to me. And about halfway through the flight, he says, do you live in Chicago? And that's always a horrible question, because I don't know where I live anymore. But I'm going to Chicago for work. And I ask him, do you live in Chicago? And he says, no, I'm going for a bachelor party. Awesome. And then he turns to me and he says, do you have any advice on places that we might want to go to? And I lean into him and I say, hey, have you seen these gray hairs? I'm probably not the best person to be asking, but hey, I've got some ideas. So then I asked him, what do you do for a living? And he said, I'm an orthodontist. And I'm like, well, no wonder he asked me that question. It makes total sense to me. I'm in the dental and medical consulting profession. And so he asked me what I did. I told him I was a consultant. And he asked me where I lived. And I said I live in Estero, and he's practicing in Naples, Florida. And I told him I had a number of different clients in Naples. And we got talking about those clients. It turns out he knew 2 or 3 of them. And I expressed to him that this was really a passion of mine. I loved this business tremendously, and that I felt really strongly that I built good client relationships. And so, he asked me again, what is it that you think you could do for me? Well, there you go, the door's open. And I walked right into it, right through it. I told him about some of the things that I had done for some of his fellow colleagues in the area. And so by the time the plane landed in Chicago, I had taken out a piece of paper, and I had written a contract up for him, of course, and got him to sign it and date it and express that, hey, I could start a week from Monday. He's here in town for his bachelor party, and I'm in town for work, but I could be available in Naples. And so we get off the plane and we go to baggage claim, which is really unusual because I never ever put a bag through, so this must have been meant to be. And en route to baggage claim, I said to him, I'm extremely excited about working with you, but I would feel much more comfortable if you could talk to some of the clients that I've worked with, because I know how they feel about me and the trusting relationships that I've built with them. So, of course, I have everybody's name and phone number in my cell phone. I don't ever get rid of any of them, so I'm like, well, I'm going to call somebody right now. So I did. I called one of the dentists, and he had a conversation with one, and then we went to go wait for the bag and called another one, and he talked to them. And so the next thing I said to him was, might you want to make a deposit? And he took out his checkbook, which was also extremely interesting to me, that he would be carrying a checkbook, and wrote me a check for $10,000. I went to the bank, I deposited it, it cleared, and a week from Monday, I was in his office. So I know that those relationships that I had built before that we contacted provided those referrals and recommendations that I needed to prove that I was a trustworthy enough person for this man to actually write me a check for $10,000, which was quite interesting. So when you're thinking about those trusting relationships, think about doing more. Think about going the extra mile. But also know in building trusting relationships, you have to be patient. They're built on small, small, small stepping stones. Speaking the language. I came to Eighth Light with a really, I felt, at that time, 20-some, almost 30 years of sales and communicating in a professional world experience. I have never, I don't know if I said this before, I've never made a resume. I made a resume for the first teaching job out of college. Since then, somebody's always come looking for me, which is really great that I didn't make a resume on any of the jobs I've ever had, because I've always been the least experienced, least qualified person for the job, every single time, which has probably been good for me. So I come to Eighth Light, I know nothing, and I mean nothing, about software development. So in the first week, I asked my son and his business partner, they were the only two people I knew in the company, tell me everything you can tell me, in a shorter period of time, because I'm going to go out and sell your product. And I can spell custom software development, but that's about as far as I can go. So my son says to me, why don't you sit in on an iteration meeting? You'll get an opportunity to see how our craftsmen work with the clients, and get an opportunity also to see how the clients act in these iteration meetings. So I think I was there on day 2 or day 3, and I sat in on one. First of all, I had no idea what an iteration meeting was. I sit down in the room and I take out my notepad, and I'm going to be there because all I want to do is gather information, try to understand what's going on. And I hear words like, iteration, continuous integration, pair programming, TDD, ODD. There were so many acronyms being thrown around, I had no idea what they meant. And I thought, wow, I'm really in over my head here. I don't speak this language. But then something wonderful happened. I heard Ruby on Rails. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. I get that we're building a web application for this client. They're a jeweler. This is great. This is something this is something that I actually can relate to, okay? I couldn't figure out where the Rails part fit into this. I got the Ruby, and then the next thing I heard was gems. Well, okay, we're getting into diamonds and pearls and sapphires. This, I might actually be able to add something to this conversation. Quickly found out we weren't talking about jewelry. A couple minutes went by, and one of our craftsmen started talking about Python. So here we go again. Margaret's scratching her head going, we go from jewelry to snakes, jewelry to snakes, jewelry to snakes. What in the world is going on in here? And I was so confused. I stopped taking notes because it was worthless, okay? Finally, I hear something that is like the skies open up, the rainbows come out, it's all sunshine, closure. The meeting's going to end. Thank God this thing is going to end and I can get out of here. So, you all know the end of this story. That's not what closure meant. So I'm thinking if, I wanted to go with the Python, slither underneath the conference table, out the door, and run like hell and get out of there. So the reason I tell you this story is I'm the non-technical person in the room. Imagine yourselves having other of these non-technical people in the room, that many of them can be your clients. Probably most of them are your clients. If they were really technical, they wouldn't need you. They'd do it themselves. So the point is that you have to be able to find out what it is that they can comprehend. What are they hearing when you're talking the technical talk? And because I sit in so many meetings so often, this is what I see with great frequency, and that is one of our software craftsmen saying to a client, do you understand what I just said? And 99% of the time we get this. Oh yeah, I get it. when I know they're going, no way, can't understand it, no comprehension. So one of the things that I like to suggest is that when you go home at night, to practice with your spouse or your kids or a friend or a colleague that's non-technical, tell them what you do. Talk to them about those technical terms. Explain it to them. And then sit patiently while they repeat it back to you. If you have a difficult time doing that in a verbal way, I mean, everyone in here is accustomed to every day getting up to a whiteboard. You know, draw the examples, show an analogy, but make certain that you understand that the people that are sitting in the room with you that are non-technical, and even some that you think are technical, understand exactly what it is that you're saying. Every relationship is going to have turmoil and conflict. Personal, professional, it will. This is a story that people aren't going to believe, so I'm going to preface it, okay? Again, a couple of years ago, I'm on a business trip. I'm out in California. I'm out in Palm Springs, and I'm visiting a client. And the very next day, I'm going to get up and talk in front of 150 physicians in Naples, Florida. A little bit of a distance there. I finish up with my client, and I get in my rental car, and I'm driving the 4 hours to Phoenix to catch the first flight to get me back home to Southwest Florida. And as I'm driving between Palm Springs and Phoenix, my client, who I am speaking for the next day, calls and says, hey, you know, we're all having dinner tonight. Can you join us? And so I say, not so much. I'm in California working my way to Phoenix, Phoenix to Dallas, Dallas to Fort Myers, but I'm absolutely planning on being there tomorrow to speak. And my client was kind of perturbed with me, actually more than kind of perturbed. They were like, what in the world are you doing in California? You're in front of 150 people here tomorrow. I don't have anybody else to take your place or to fill in for you. Are you really going to show up? So I realized I'm causing turmoil. My client is pretty nervous about this, wondering whether or not I'm going to come. I will tell you that I had spoken for them before, so I felt confident in saying, hey, you can trust me. I'm going to show up. Of course I'm going to show up. So I kind of allayed their fears a little bit, got to Phoenix, turning in my rental car, getting my luggage out, going to the airplane. I realized I left my computer in Palm Springs. So, of course, we all know what was on my computer. It might have been that presentation for those 90 minutes to those 150 physicians. So I did the only thing I knew what to do, and I called a really close friend of mine, the only person I knew in Palm Springs, and I called him and I said, Lou, go to the client's office, get my computer. I don't care what it costs. Get FedEx 8:30 a.m. arrival in Fort Myers. I'll get it when I get there. I'm not going to be able to tweak the presentation, but these are the kinds of things that happen. He actually did that for me. So I got on the plane in Phoenix, and as fate would have it, we were 2 hours delayed, got to Dallas, missed the last flight to Fort Myers. At that point, again, I have to do something to talk to my client. I need to let them know. Not only, he knew I wasn't coming to dinner, but I'm not going to show up at between 7:30 and 8:30 the next morning for the dress rehearsal either, because I'm going to be on an airplane, hopefully, flying back home. So I called my client and I told them, and I got this, you're not coming, are you? I know you're not coming. I mean, he obviously thought I had prefaced it with, I can't go to dinner, I'm not going to make it. I said, no, you definitely can trust me. I am coming. Please, please believe me. I'm doing the best I can. You know what, I'm so thankful that you are allowing me to actually, have all of this disruption for you, but I will actually be there. So the next morning I get up and I fly home and I get to my house as fast as I can, and I go in and I take a shower quickly, put the skirt and the heels on, I go to the front door to grab my computer. Oh, there was no computer. So I call my client and I tell him, little bit of change of plans, I'm just leaking a little bit more information about this conflict, letting him know that there might be one more piece of information I need to let you know before I get there, and that is I'm going to speak extemporaneously when I get there. And really, I'm not even sure what I'm going to say, but for 90 minutes, I'm going to chat to the audience of 150 physicians. So I get there, and after having called my client to tell him that I would be certainly I would be there, but we've little bit of disruption. So I got there, and it was very clear to me that he was not happy with me. I told him, I'm going to get up there, and I'm going to do the best I can for 90 minutes. And I did. And as I walked up the stairs onto the stage, I turned to him and I said, I just need to let you know I'm not making this up. I did make a presentation. I take this very, very seriously. But the plane, a FedEx plane, just crashed last night with my computer on it. And the look on his face was priceless. I went up, I did a 90-minute presentation. Was it as good as the canned one that I had put together? Probably not. But I did show up. I did what I said I would do. I faced the conflict head on. You know, in a perfect world, I could have seen him in person to tell him what was going on, but I called him. I kept him in the loop every step of the way. I admitted to my failures, and I apologized. And most importantly, I let him know that my actions spoke louder than my words. Maintaining the client relationships. This is a part for me it's just plain old easy, okay? I love people. I really haven't met anyone I don't like yet, which is really a luxury at my age. I make an effort to stay connected to people, and I encourage everyone to do the same. I reach out to people by calling them, something called a telephone. When I first got to A's Lights, probably the thing I heard the most in the first year I was there. Well, what do you mean you want to come over and meet me? People don't come to meet me. People email me. People text me. I'm like, no, I actually want to meet you face to face, or I want to talk to you on the telephone. I want to take you to breakfast. I want to take you to lunch. I want to get to know who you are. And I want you to know that I can remain fresh in your mind. When I was in consulting for about 15 years, every single month, I sat down and I wrote a thank you letter to everybody that was my client. And to most of my prospects, I wrote the same thing. It took time, it was tedious, but I wanted everybody to know I was thinking about them. And in it, I put a chocolate candy bar. Many months I was short on those chocolate candy bars because my children found out where I kept them and they ate them. So that caused a little bit of annoyance for me. But I wanted to remain fresh in the minds of all those people that I had developed relationships with. So I would go to trade shows and I would go to meetings and conferences, and people I never met would come up to me and say, "Are you the candy lady? Are you the candy lady?" And I would go, "That would be me." So make yourself memorable. Find a way to make yourself memorable. So good communicators live it. Think about that. They live it every day. It's not work. It shouldn't be something that you look at that's tedious, that takes a lot of time out of your day. I'm going to leave you with one final story that happened to me recently. As I told you, I live in Chicago. I don't have a car there. I live about 10 blocks from work, so I get up every morning and I walk to work. And about 3 months ago, I decided I'm going to give up Starbucks. I'm old enough and mature enough to know that paying $4 for grande non-fat chai, no water, is ridiculous. So then I add the $4 up over the course of 7 days a week, 52 weeks, and I'm thinking, enough. So on this particular day, I probably hadn't been to Starbucks in about a month, but I had been up late the night before and was up early going to work, and I thought, oh, I just need caffeine. And I'm a person that's never had a cup of coffee a day in my life. And on a bet with one of my kids, I gave up drinking diet soda a little over 2 years ago. So my caffeine comes by way of grande non-fat chai, no water. So I'm walking to work, and I decide I'm going to go into Starbucks. So I go, there's maybe 4 or 5 of them en route for me on my way to work. So I go by them every day, and I had been for at least a month, every time I walk by each one of them, oh, today's the day. Well, that day was the day. So I go in, and it's about 7:25 in the morning, and there's a pretty long line. There's maybe 10 or 15 people in front of me in the line, and I'm starting to observe what's going on in the Starbucks, and I see the people behind the counter that are taking the orders, and clearly the manager was behind there too. Every time somebody would place an order, they'd ask their name, but they ask it loudly. I mean, I know that they do this pretty routinely at Starbucks. And then they would call out their name. Hey, you know, Susie wants whatever it is that Susie wanted, and she wants to have a muffin to go along with it. And as they were filling orders, they were patting each other on the back, the people that worked there. And I thought, wow, this is really a great way for Margaret Pagel to start her day, because these people are super energizing. I loved it. So when it was my turn and I got up there to order my grande non-fat chai, no water, for $4.03, I asked, can I see the manager? And the blank on the face of the woman that was taking my order. I'm sure she thought, uh-oh, this lady's been standing in line for, 10 minutes, and she's going to whine about the fact that it took forever to get her tea. But instead, the manager came up and I said, I just wanted to let you know that I haven't been in a Starbucks for a month, and this is such a welcoming experience for me this morning. Everybody is so happy and so energized, and I feel so great about it. I just wanted to compliment you. Well, the smile on her face was enormous. And so when it was my turn to go pick my drink up, the manager brought it to me at the little bar, and she goes, grande non-fat chai, no water for Margaret Pagel. Let's all clap for Margaret Pagel. Okay, so there's like 20 people in there, and I'm mortified, okay? So I'm like, another one of those slithering moments. So I take my tea, and I'm getting ready to walk out the door and walk on to work. And the manager runs out from behind the counter, and she goes, do you have 10 minutes? And so I'm like, sure. And she goes, well, I just need to let you know that the vice president of Starbucks for the regional area is in town, and our office is across the street. Could you come over there with me? All right. Really, all I wanted was a tea, but sure, that's all good. So anyways, I go across the street, meet the vice president. John's his name, and he's like, oh my gosh, nobody ever compliments us. This is awesome. This is great. Can I give you a $50 gift certificate? So of course, now you all know I'm going every day now. But so I take the $50 gift certificate, and because I'm in sales, we all know what happened next. I ensued this conversation with him about what it is I do for a living. And he's like, well, maybe there's a way that we can work together. I need to call somebody from our IT department. And so I gave him my card, and I said, if there's an opportunity, feel free to call me. About 2 weeks ago, he called me. So hope to have a meeting with him here shortly. But the reason I tell you this story is that you need to practice the small talk, or attempt to practice the small talk. In everyday life, anywhere you can, practice it. Practice it with anyone, and definitely practice it with everyone. Thank you for your time.